I never thought I'd be the kind of person to install cameras in my own home. Then again, I never thought I'd get a call from my property manager telling me my utilities were through the roof either. My name's Derek Morrison, and I'm a long-haul trucker based out of Calgary. 41 years old, divorced 3 years now, and living alone in a modest bungalow in the Bridgeland neighborhood. It's not much, just a 2-bedroom place I bought after the split, but it's mine. Or at least, I thought it was. I'm on the road about 20 days a month, hauling freight between Alberta and British Columbia. It's decent money, and the solitude suits me fine. My ex-wife, Jennifer, used to complain that I was married to the highway more than I was to her. She wasn't entirely wrong. After the divorce, I figured living alone would be perfect for my lifestyle. No one to worry about, no one to check in with, just me and the open road. That was my life for 2.5 years. Peaceful, simple, until October 17th, when everything changed. I was 3 days into a run to Vancouver when my phone rang. It was Charlotte Reed, the property manager for my neighborhood association. We'd only spoken a handful of times, usually about snow removal or the annual homeowners meeting. "Derek, hi. Sorry to bother you while you're working," she said. Her voice had that apologetic but serious tone that immediately put me on edge. "I need to talk to you about something unusual. I was at a truck stop just outside Golden, fueling up. What's going on?" "Well, I received a notice from NMAX about your property. Your electricity usage has spiked dramatically in the past 2 months. We're talking about triple your normal consumption." I frowned, watching the numbers climb on the fuel pump. "That doesn't make sense. I'm barely home." "That's what I thought," Charlotte said. "And there's something else. One of your neighbors, Mrs. Patterson, she mentioned seeing someone at your house on multiple occasions." "A man," she said. "She assumed it was a friend you'd given a key to while you were away." My hand tightened on the fuel nozzle. "I haven't given anyone a key. There shouldn't be anybody there." There was a pause. "Derek, I think you might want to come home and check on things." I finished that delivery run faster than I'd ever done before. What should have taken 2 more days, I compressed into 1. I barely slept, my mind racing through possibilities. Had I been robbed? Was someone squatting in my house? The thought of a stranger in my home, touching my things, sleeping in my bed, it made my skin crawl. I arrived back in Calgary at 11 p.m. on October 19th. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I parked my truck at the depot and took my personal vehicle, a Honda CR-V I kept there for exactly these situations. I drove slowly through my neighborhood, looking for anything unusual. When I reached my street, I killed the headlights and coasted to a stop 3 houses down from mine. Everything looked normal. The porch light was on, just like I'd left it on a timer. But as I watched, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A light turned on in my living room. Then, a few seconds later, the kitchen light. Someone was definitely in there. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, watching. At 11:47 p.m., I saw movement through the front window. A figure, clearly male, walked past. He was in a white t-shirt, holding what looked like a beer bottle. My beer, I thought bitterly, from my fridge. Every instinct screamed at me to storm in there, to confront whoever this was. But I thought about what Charlotte had said. This had been going on for 2 months. This wasn't some random break-in. This was organized, deliberate, and if I went in there without knowing what I was dealing with, things could go very wrong. I made myself drive away. I checked into a Holiday Inn near the airport and spent the night lying awake, staring at the ceiling, planning my next move. The next morning, I did something I should have done immediately. I called the police non-emergency line. The officer I spoke with, Constable Andrews, was sympathetic but cautious. "Mr. Morrison, we can absolutely send someone to check it out," he said. "But I'll be honest with you. If there's no sign of forced entry, if someone has a key and is claiming some kind of permission to be there, it becomes a civil matter rather than criminal. We see this sometimes with bad roommate situations or disputes between family members. I live alone. I didn't give anyone permission. I understand, sir. But what I'm saying is, it helps your case significantly if you can document what's happening. Security cameras, if possible. A record of unauthorized entry. Then we can build a clear case for breaking and entering, trespassing, whatever applies." I thanked him and hung up. He was right, even though it frustrated me. I needed evidence. I spent the morning at a Best Buy, buying 3 wireless security cameras and a doorbell camera, the kind that records to the cloud, so even if someone found them, they couldn't destroy the footage. I also bought a cheap tablet to monitor the feeds remotely. That afternoon, while I was certain the intruder would be gone, I went back to my house. I parked a block away and approached on foot, watching carefully. The place seemed empty. I let myself in through the back door, moving quietly even though I was in my own home. The violation hit me immediately. There were dishes in the sink that weren't mine, a coffee mug I'd never seen before. The living room showed signs of use, subtle things. The couch cushions were arranged differently. There was an empty beer can on the coffee table. Not just any beer, my beer, from the case I'd left in the garage fridge. I walked through the house in a daze. Someone had been living here, really living here. The bathroom had an extra toothbrush. There were different towels hanging up. In the spare bedroom, the one I used as an office, the desk had been moved. Papers I'd left in neat stacks were shuffled. And then I checked my bedroom. Someone had been sleeping in my bed. I could see the impression in the mattress, the way the blankets were pulled back on one side. There was a book on the nightstand that wasn't mine. Some thriller novel with a bookmark halfway through. I felt physically sick. This stranger hadn't just broken into my house. He'd made himself at home. He'd been living my life in my absence. I set up the cameras carefully. One in the living room, disguised behind some books on a shelf, with a clear view of the front door and main area. One in the kitchen, tucked above the cabinets. One in the hallway, where it could catch anyone moving between rooms. And the doorbell camera, which would alert me every time someone approached. I didn't change anything else. Didn't clean up, didn't move things back. I wanted him to think everything was normal. Then I left, locking up, and drove back to the hotel. The cameras were motion activated. I set up the app on my tablet and waited. I didn't have to wait long. At 4:17 p.m., my phone buzzed with a doorbell notification. I opened the app and watched as a man in his mid-30s, wearing a Canada Goose jacket and carrying a gym bag, walked up to my front door. He was white, about 5'10", with short brown hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He looked completely normal, like any other guy you'd see at a Tim Hortons. He pulled out a key, my key, and let himself in. I watched through the camera feeds as he moved through my house like he owned it. He went to the kitchen first, opened the fridge, grabbed a beer. He tossed his gym bag on my couch. He turned on my TV and sat down, flipping through channels. I recorded everything. Over the next 3 days, I documented his routine. He arrived every afternoon between 4 and 5. He'd work out in my basement, using the weight bench I kept down there. He'd cook dinner in my kitchen, using my groceries. He'd watch TV. Around 10 or 11 at night, he'd go to sleep in my guest room, not my master bedroom, which I found oddly considerate in a completely insane way. But here's where it got interesting. On the third day, October 23rd, someone else showed up. At 6:32 p.m., my doorbell camera caught a woman approaching. She was maybe early 40s, blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, athletic build. She knocked, which surprised me since the man had a key. Through the interior camera, I watched the man answer. They clearly knew each other. They hugged, talked for a moment at the door, and then she came in. She was carrying a large purse and what looked like a laptop bag. They sat at my dining room table, and this is where things took a turn I wasn't expecting. She pulled out the laptop and papers, and they started going through documents. I couldn't see everything clearly, but I could see enough. They were reviewing papers, pointing at the screen, having what looked like a business meeting. In my house, I took screenshots of everything. I zoomed in as much as the camera quality would allow. On one of the documents, I could make out a header. It looked like a rental agreement. A rental agreement. That's when it clicked. I pulled out my own laptop and started searching. I went to Airbnb first, typing in my address. And there it was, my house. Listed as cozy Calgary bungalow, perfect for extended stays. The photos were of my home, my living room, my kitchen, my backyard. The description talked about a quiet residential neighborhood and all the comforts of home. The nightly rate was $215. There were 7 reviews, all 5 stars, dating back 6 weeks. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. This wasn't just someone squatting. This was organized fraud. Someone was running an illegal rental operation out of my home while I was on the road. I scrolled through the reviews, my hands shaking. Great place, very clean. Host was accommodating with late check-in. Felt just like home. Host. They were calling this man, this criminal, the host of my property. I kept watching the cameras. The woman stayed for about 2 hours. I managed to get a clear shot of one document they were reviewing, and I could make out a name at the top, Brian Kostecki. I immediately started searching. Brian Kostecki, Calgary. It didn't take long. Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I found him. According to his profiles, he was a freelance property manager. His LinkedIn said he specialized in short-term rental management and property optimization. The woman was harder to identify, but I caught a break when they said goodbye at the door, and the camera picked up their conversation. Thanks again, Melissa. I think we're good for the next few bookings, Brian said. No problem. Just remember, we need to be out by the 15th when the owner comes back, she replied. The 15th. That was when I'd originally told my dispatcher I'd be back, but I'd come back early. They had no idea I was already here, watching. I spent the rest of that evening researching. Melissa turned out to be Melissa Vance, a graphic designer who, according to her website, also did marketing consulting. It seemed she was the one handling the Airbnb listing, the photos, the descriptions. She was the digital face of this operation. But there was still something that bothered me. How did Brian get a key? How did he know I'd be gone? How did he know my schedule? I went back through my security footage, watching every moment I'd captured, and then I noticed something. On the second day of surveillance, Brian had a visitor around lunchtime. Older man, maybe 60, wearing a jacket with a logo I couldn't quite make out. I enhanced the screenshot as much as possible. The logo looked like a wrench and a house. I searched Calgary property, maintenance wrench logo, and found it. Mountain Peak Property Services. My property management company. The company I paid to check on my house when I was away. The company that had a spare key. The company that had my complete schedule because I always notified them when I'd be gone for extended periods. I called Charlotte Reed again. Charlotte, does Mountain Peak Property Services work with any of the properties you manage? Mountain Peak? Sure. They're one of the contractors we use. Why? Do they have access to homeowner information? Like schedules? Contact information? There was a pause. Derek, what's going on? I told her everything. The illegal rental, Brian Kostecki, the connection to Mountain Peak. Oh my God, she breathed. Derek, you need to report this right now. I am. But I need more evidence. Can you check if any other homeowners in the neighborhood have complained about unusual activity or high utility bills? She promised to look into it and get back to me. Meanwhile, I kept watching. Over the next week, I documented everything. I captured footage of 3 different Airbnb guests staying at my house. I recorded Brian meeting with Melissa twice more. I got clear images of the Mountain Peak employee, who turned out to be named Gerald Hawthorne, according to his employee badge, which I managed to capture on the doorbell camera. But the breakthrough came on October 29th. I was monitoring the feed when Brian and Melissa had another meeting. This time, their conversation was clearly audible through the camera microphone. Gerald's getting nervous, Melissa said. He thinks the Morrison guy is going to figure it out. He won't, Brian replied confidently. He's a trucker. He's never home. We've been doing this for almost 3 months, and he hasn't noticed. But what about the utility spike? What if he gets suspicious? So what if he does? We've made over $18,000 off this property alone. Even if we have to shut it down, we've got 4 other houses in the rotation. 4 other houses? This wasn't just about me. This was a criminal operation targeting multiple properties. Melissa pulled out her phone. I'm worried about the one on Radcliffe Drive. The owner's only gone 2 weeks a month. That's cutting it close. We'll be fine. Gerald's been careful about choosing properties. All the owners are out of town frequently. All the spare keys are easily accessible through Mountain Peak. It's foolproof. I had it all on recording. The next morning, November 1st, I walked into the Calgary Police Service District Office with my tablet, my laptop, and a folder full of printed screenshots and documentation. The detective assigned to my case was Rebecca Wu, a sharp woman in her late 30s who listened to my story with increasing concern. Mr. Morrison, you've done excellent work documenting this, she said after reviewing my evidence. This is clearly organized fraud, breaking and entering, theft of services, and potentially identity theft depending on how they're representing ownership of your property. There are at least 4 other properties involved, I told her. They mentioned them on camera. Detective Wu nodded. We'll need to investigate those. Do you know the addresses? One is on Radcliffe Drive. I don't know the others. We'll work with your property management company to identify potential targets. If this Gerald Hawthorne had access to multiple properties through his employment, we can narrow it down. Over the next 2 weeks, Detective Wu and her team built their case. They identified the 4 other properties, all owned by people who traveled frequently for work. They interviewed Gerald Hawthorne, who broke almost immediately and provided detailed information about the operation. It turned out Brian had approached him 6 months earlier with the scheme. Gerald would identify suitable properties, provide keys and schedules, and get 20% of the profits. They'd made over $73,000 in total. The sting operation happened on November 14th. Police waited until Brian and Melissa were both at my property, meeting with an Airbnb guest who was checking in for a 3-day stay. When they knocked on the door, the look on Brian's face was something I'll never forget. I was there, standing behind the officers, watching as they arrested him and Melissa. The Airbnb guest, a young woman from Toronto visiting for a conference, was mortified when she learned the truth. She hadn't known. None of the guests had. They'd all booked through the platform, paid money, and thought they were staying in a legitimate rental. Brian Kostecki was charged with breaking and entering, fraud over $5,000, theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Melissa Vance faced similar charges for her role in managing the listings and collecting payments. Gerald Hawthorne was charged with breach of trust and conspiracy. The trial took place the following spring. I had to testify, showing the hours of security footage I'd collected. The prosecutor used my documentation as the backbone of the case. Brian's lawyer tried to argue that since there was no forced entry and the guests were legitimate renters, the charges were overblown. The judge wasn't sympathetic. In the end, Brian got 2 years in provincial jail and 5 years probation. Melissa got 18 months. Gerald, who cooperated fully, got a suspended sentence and probation. All 3 were ordered to pay restitution, split among the 5 property owners who'd been victimized. My share of the restitution was just over $14,000, which roughly covered the utility bills, the cost of changing all my locks, the security system, and the violation of knowing strangers had been living in my home. But money wasn't really the point. The point was that I'd trusted the system. I'd hired a property management company specifically to keep my home safe while I was working, and someone within that system had betrayed that trust, had sold access to my private space for profit. I sold the house 6 months later. I couldn't live there anymore. Every time I walked through those rooms, I saw Brian sitting on my couch, drinking my beer, sleeping in my guest room. I saw Melissa at my dining room table, calculating profits from my property. I saw Gerald Hawthorne handing over my key like I didn't matter, like my home didn't matter. I bought a condo instead, one in a secured building with 24/7 security. I installed cameras everywhere. I checked the feeds multiple times a day, even when I'm just gone for a few hours. My ex-wife Jennifer called me after she heard about what happened. "Derek, that's horrible. Are you okay?" I told her I was fine. I'm not sure that was entirely true. Some violations you can't really measure in dollars and cents. Someone took my sanctuary, my private space, and turned it into a commodity. They sold access to my life, my belongings, my bed. They made it into a business transaction while I was out working to pay for it all. The other 4 homeowners went through similar experiences. One woman, Amanda Cheung, told me she found reviews of her house online talking about the comfortable master bedroom and the well-stocked kitchen. Strangers had been raiding her home, her personal space, like it was a hotel. Another victim, Marcus Thompson, discovered that someone had gone through his personal documents while staying there. His identity information had been compromised. He spent months dealing with fraudulent credit card applications. The ripple effects of this kind of crime go beyond the initial violation. You lose your sense of security. You question everything. Every time something seems off, you wonder if someone's been in your space again. Mountain Peak Property Services went out of business within 3 months of the arrests. The owners claimed they had no knowledge of Gerald's activities, but the damage to their reputation was catastrophic. None of us believed they were completely ignorant. How does an employee have that kind of access without oversight? There were civil lawsuits, too. All 5 homeowners sued Mountain Peak. We settled out of court for undisclosed amounts. but it was enough to feel like some justice had been served on that front as well. I learned a lot from this experience. Things I wish I'd known before it happened. First, if you travel frequently, don't just trust that your property is secure. Install cameras, even if you trust your property management company. Trust, but verify. Those cameras were the only reason I had enough evidence to prosecute. Second, monitor your utilities closely. That spike in electricity usage was the first red flag, but I didn't see it until Charlotte brought it to my attention. If I'd been paying closer attention, I might have caught this months earlier. Third, build relationships with your neighbors. Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor who noticed someone at my house, was trying to look out for me. If I'd known her better, if I'd told her explicitly that no one should be there when I'm gone, she might have called me directly instead of just mentioning it casually to Charlotte. Fourth, don't give spare keys to companies without doing thorough background checks. And even then, consider alternatives. Smart locks with temporary codes that you can control remotely. Secure lockboxes with rotating combinations. Anything that gives you more control and less blind trust. Fifth, check if your property is listed on rental platforms. Just search your address on Airbnb, VRBO, and similar sites. It seems obvious now, but it never occurred to me that someone would be bold enough to list my property without my knowledge. They were counting on that assumption. Finally, if something feels wrong, act on it immediately. Don't wait. Don't rationalize it away. I was lucky that I came home when I did, that I followed my instincts to investigate before confronting anyone. If I'd waited longer, who knows how much worse it could have gotten. The psychological impact of this kind of crime is something people don't talk about enough. It's not like a break-in where someone smashes a window, steals your TV, and leaves. This was methodical, sustained, personal. They didn't just steal from me, they borrowed my life. I still drive long haul. I still spend weeks on the road. But now I check my cameras obsessively. I have alerts set for every door, every window, every motion sensor. My neighbors have my number and explicit instructions to call me if they see anything unusual. I've probably gone overboard with security, but I don't care. You only get violated like this once before you become paranoid. On the 1-year anniversary of discovering the illegal rental, I drove past my old house. There were new owners, a young family with 2 kids. I saw a bike in the driveway and a small garden growing in the front yard. It looked happy, lived in, loved. I hope they never experience what I did. I hope they never have to wonder who's been in their home when they're away. I hope their trust in people and systems isn't shattered the way mine was. But I also hope they're careful, because the world has people like Brian Kostecki and Melissa Vance and Gerald Hawthorne in it. People who see your property, your privacy, your sanctuary, as nothing more than an opportunity for profit. People who will take advantage of trust, of absence, of the little gaps in security we all have. My father used to say that home is where you feel safest. For a long time after this, I didn't feel safe anywhere. It's taken therapy, time, and a lot of work to rebuild that sense of security. I'm getting there, slowly. The cameras help. The secured building helps. But mostly, what helps is knowing that I took action. I didn't let them get away with it. I documented everything. I reported it properly, and I saw it through to prosecution. I took back my power in the only way I could. If you're reading this and you travel for work, or you own property you're not at frequently, please learn from my experience. Don't assume your home is safe just because you hired someone to watch over it. Don't assume that a locked door is enough. Don't assume that people won't have the audacity to move into your space and profit from it. They will, and they do. More often than you'd think. Protect yourself. Protect your space. And if you discover something like this happening to you, don't confront the situation alone. Get evidence. Call the police. Build a case. Let the system work the way it's supposed to. Because at the end of the day, your home isn't just a building or an investment. It's your sanctuary. It's where you should feel safe, secure, and private. Don't let anyone take that from you. And if they do, fight like hell to get it back.